Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EIGHTH TRUST Symposium, which reflects on the EIGHTH Trust of the Compassion Arts Festival, meaning having the courage of our convictions through highlighting ways that creativity, artistry, innovation, and veganism can be tools for advancing positive social change. The EIGHTH Trust Symposium presenters include Aysha Akthar of Contemporary Sciences, artists Jack and Alise Eastgate of Eastrand Studios, Anna Bradley of Sentient Media, After Animals podcast, and the artistry of none other than myself, Donald Vincent, also known as Mr. Hip. Speakers today are going to share their work in poetry. I'll share some of my own work throughout this evening with you all. Visual art, advocacy, science, journalism, compassionate technologies, education, and the interconnections of plant-based living, the environment, social justice, food empowerment, and caring for animals and the earth. Now, I can't think of a better event to bring all of these things together than this EIGHTH Trust Symposium today. My first guest is going to be the first duo of Eastrand Studios, Jack Eastgate. Jack is a Fiji-born graphic designer, illustrator, live painter, art educator, and muralist. A multidisciplinary creative, his work embraces a balance between creative and analytical qualities and employs the techniques of sacred geometry and the inspiration of nature. You all watching are going to wish you paid attention to geometry class. His design career took a turn when he jumped into the world of environmental wayfinding graphics, with a variety of projects from digital to analog, interactive signs to gigantic 600-foot digital murals, working with clients like Disney, Universal Studios, and many more. You can find out more of Jack's information on jackeastgate.com. I hope you enjoy this wonderful interview that I got to talk with Jack. Get ready, pop that popcorn, and give me a couple seconds to bring up Jack's video. Thank you. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us. We have the wonderful Eastgate here with us to talk a little bit more about the EIGHTH Trust, which is having the courage of our own convictions through highlighting the ways that creativity, artistry, innovation, and veganism can be tools for advancing positive social change. I'm excited to talk with Jack and his wife, Alise, who will be joining us later. Me and Jack have been having a wonderful conversation. You know, some of that is privy to me. So I'm just honored to be able to just be in the mind of Jack. And hopefully we can delve a little bit further into these topics for our viewers today. So my first question for you, Jack, is going to be, how long have you been vegan and living a compassionate lifestyle?
Thank you, Donald. Thanks for having us on here. Definitely appreciate that. My wife and I, we went vegan together in 2012. It was kind of around that time that whole Aztec 2012 thing was going down, and there was that, and so it's been about almost 9 years. Is that 9 years?
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Yeah. So I grew up. I was born in Fiji, and I grew up on a beef sheep farm where I did everything from raising to, unfortunately, slaughtering these wonderful harmless creatures. And it didn't bother me until I met my wife and we started this transition. But one thing I did notice is that when I moved to America, I did notice a change in the taste of beef, especially. So I sort of stuck to fish when most of my time here in the States, and it really solidified when I took a trip to LA on that freeway. I don't know, is it the 5, the 1? not the one, but it goes through a factory farm. And no matter how, the windows are closed, the air conditioning's on blast, the smell just permeates the car, the whole ship, the fabric and everything. And it's just really bothering for me. And so in my mind, what we did in Fiji was, oh, that's much better. So we're better. Because we do grass-fed, we do free range, we do these things. And so there's this I guess judgment to other ways. And so that affected what I ate when I moved to the States in 2003, and mostly consumed fish. And it was when I met my wife, Alise, and she has a very fascinating story. It feels like she's an old soul because, and she can talk more on this, but she would tell me the story of when she was really young, 5, but refusing to eat meat. And to me, I was like, wow, so young, the parents, how do you even do that? And so that was part of her journey. And so she was I think vegetarian for a little bit, but more aligned with what was going to happen. And it was in 2012, I took her to Fiji for the first time, and it was right after a cyclone.
Okay.
And so we had to we waited a week for it to clear down, so that we got there. There was still the effects of the cyclone, but one of the effects was nobody could go out on their boats to fish, so the fish markets were empty. And for me, I went back and I was just like, I want to get some Fiji fish and do these things, and it didn't happen. And I didn't force it or anything. It was just like, oh, okay, this is what it was. Long story short, we come back to the States. We got pizza from our favorite spot down the street where we used to live. And immediately, I mean, not immediately, but maybe 20 minutes afterwards, we're like, whoa, that doesn't quite feel right. Let's look into this more. And so then we were like, oh, let's cut out dairy. Let's cut out that cheese. Took a little bit longer. And as you know, the casomorphines that make cheese addictive, and whatever else they put in there, and the millions of dollars they spend on got milk advertising and all that stuff. So cheese was still kind of on the table, but we were focused primarily on fish. And it just happened naturally. There wasn't any crazy video we had watched, because I had already seen those videos, and I had experienced it myself, so it wasn't much of a surprise. But it was a very gradual, natural thing. We just started to eliminate things from our diet, or not eliminate, but substitute. And when we were noticing immediately the effect. And then we dove into it more and started to see the other effects, how veganism, plant-based diets, how it influences racism, or it is influenced by racism, how it influences poverty, how it has its hand in so many of these things. Like, if you think of it, it's really anti-feminist, because most of the meat or animal products is from female animals. Milk is from a female cow, and not a lot of people know that. The cow has to be pregnant to produce milk. It's common knowledge. That is just what a lot of people miss, because there's such a society, and I feel like it's an underlying agenda and money, right, to get these products out there. And if you look at the story of milk, I think it was after World War II, there was a huge surplus of milk, and so they had to sell it. And so I think that's when these campaigns of drink milk, got milk, really started. And so race, who are the people working in the slaughterhouses?
Yep.
Where are the slaughterhouses located? Where they mostly brown, Black communities, the people that work in these events. And we started to hear the stories of, and I did it, you know, and I have my trauma, but it wasn't my 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, where you're processing animals. And, you know, we started to see the stories of the psychological trauma that these factory workers who's only, that's their only option for work because of the area and the all the other racial aspects of the US and where people live and who gets access to what resources. Going back to the part about female animals, eggs, right? Chickens, female is the egg. Most of the beef at McDonald's is expired dairy cows. Expired, such a shitty word for an animal, because if you think of it, we have a son, our first son, and means the world to us. And the idea of that being taken away is just devastating.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, for an animal, an animal just like us can probably only go through that devastation so many times. So the average lifespan of a dairy cow is 4 years. You know, and all these other things came into play, like in Fiji, a beef cow takes 3 years to grow, and here, because of the hormone and stuff, it's 6 months, so they can have a higher turnaround. That's that beef. But the expired cows, the egg industry in itself is like, you know, with the male chicks go into the grinder, and you know, to the folks that are like, well, we have home backyard chickens. Well, most of those chickens that you bought, the little chicks, came from a factory farm. So in essence, you're still supporting that industry. And a chicken isn't meant to continually lay. A chicken, you know, and in Fiji it's crazy. We used to be like, oh, the chicken's gone crazy because it's eating its eggs. It's like, no, that's not natural. It's reabsorbing all the silica and all the nutrients. It hasn't been, say, fertilized by the male rooster. And so these other backyard hens, they're going through that same process, and it's very taxing on their body. Yeah, so that we had sort of a natural progression into it, because there was the lack of the hurricane that caused us, and that drove us into this other area. And after discovering all these other things that were related to it, it was just incredible information. Probably overwhelmed me to the bit where I was like in people's inboxes like, yo, you got to try this thing out, because it's doing all these things. And I never heard from them again.
Yeah, I think what makes your story interesting is that natural progression to that, right? And you mentioned the trauma it is of working with beef, and how you're using your own hands, your own eyes to kind of witness this inhumane treatment of animals. And that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, okay, you grew up on this beef farm. When did you first realize you wanted to be an artist?
From a very early age, I wanted to draw. We wasn't encouraged, and not to the fault of my parents. The parents told me what they know, right? So my parents had a successful surf and turf restaurant in Fiji for 16 years. It's a floating restaurant. It's a boat. It's still there, and that was that was my life. It was in the kitchen, good fish. I could go out, catch fish, and sell it to the restaurant, and that. And so, I'm sorry. What was your question one more time?
When did you first realize you wanted to be an artist?
Artist, yes. And so my parents were like, "No, business is the way you gotta go." And being me, I was like, "No, this is what I want to do." I got my sort of first art class. This is also an unfortunate thing because I would consider my upbringing very privileged, super privileged. My parents were they were well off. They were able to afford things that a lot of people couldn't, and they did the best that they could to provide for me. And one of that was going to an international school. That happened after the third military coup, and they shut down schools, and so I went to finish school. So I went to this international school, and that's where I got my first exposure to an actual art class, and that was it. And so after I graduated, I was working on the farm, and I was like, this is not it. This is not my life. And luckily, my sister, she had already moved to the States. She went to school in Michigan, and she had moved out to Oakland with her husband. I was like, okay, cool, I can start there. So I did that, started there, and that's when I started studying graphic design. Because in my head, that was combining art with business. So I was achieving that. And as an artist, it really clicked when a friend, I went to on my break, I went to the college cafeteria, and they had this band that was playing, and I just decided to sketch them. And the lovely lady, Amber McSteele, I showed her the piece, and she's like, "Yo, that's amazing. Call this dude a team Chenzira." And a team, he was my first client, and we're really good friends till this day. And whenever he needs project, like I did an animation project for him last year, he'll call me up, and so it was a good relationship. I called him up, and he said, "I have an event, and I need a live painter. Can you do it?" And I was like, "Yes." And so I'm there. He hangs up, and I'm like, shit, what the hell is live painting? I'm not a painter. So I go to the garage, find all the house paints as possible. I find a drop cloth. And I go to his events, this huge piece. It would cover the whole back wall. And he put me up on this elevated platform, and they had music, and I went at it. And I couldn't stop. The event ended like 12 o'clock. He came out and brought me coffee at 7 in, and a joint. He's like, "You're still there?" And I was just like, I had not experienced that before. And there's definitely the aspect of live painting that has the people, the music, the environment that definitely influences me. Like Alise, she is a studio artist. Easy. She could lock the door and in this room, put her headphones in and paint. And for me, I would get a little bit distracted and start doing other things. And so I find that I could get these long periods at live painting events. And so that was the first one. And I did that for a while. There was this party in Oakland, the People's Party. Did you ever?
I'm not familiar.
It ran for 10 years. Amazing experience. I think it changed a lot of people's lives, especially mine. I was introduced to house for the first time, and not the house that's typical, but the deep soul house. And these events, they would be like packed with the people, and it looked like the scene from The Matrix where they're all dancing in that cave.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on? And I did that for 3 years. They had the party every month, so that was the go-to. Every month I'd show up and have these pieces, and I amassed about 50 or so canvases in that time. And so I've been selling them, exhibits, and then repurposing if I want to. But that was really what kicked off where I was like, okay, I'm an artist.
Yeah.
I believe I'm an artist, and this is what I'm going to do now. So
Yeah.
I think that was that.
Yeah, I really enjoy like that story and that pathway to becoming an artist. I think that's most important for a lot of our origin stories as creators, right? And when you mentioned like your first piece was this live piece of that would take up the entire wall, it really puts it into perspective for me when I look at you and your wife's work, that of the mural work that you all create. So, you know, the first piece kind of still sticks with you today. So I really do enjoy that. My next question again, just similar art stuff, but more so going back into our topic of the EIGHTH Trust is, what does your work now aim to say, and what stories do you hope to tell?
I mean, definitely with my own personal work, I moved into a direction of just, I love drawing plants. I love drawing flowers. That's there's music in the middle of that, but the most part I've focused on my youth and the lush vegetation, and that's what brings me joy nowadays. And like working for AFCO and those other Brother Vegan, those other books, those definitely like in terms of bringing it into our life as vegans and getting a message across, especially Aft's book, because there was some really conceptual drawings that we created, and it really made us both as artists grow, because it brought in a different aspect of the research and pulling in from this media and then putting it together. And especially when it's going to be in a book and you have a huge paragraph talking about what we're drawing. And that for us really inspires us to keep that way. But in terms of, and Alise will have her motivations and inspiration when she comes in. You probably heard my son running around in the back there. Did I answer that question properly?
Oh, you answered it perfectly.
Okay.
I wouldn't, you answered it perfectly. And I think about the lush vegetation that you like to enjoy, like it again ties into really being plant-based and our love for food, our love for life, plants. The wonderful, wonderful Jack Eastgate. I'm so excited that we were able to have that wonderful conversation, learn more about his artistry. Later in the program, we're going to have his wife, Alise Eastgate, join us for another conversation about what she also is working on, some of her projects, and how you can support a lot of these artists, because supporting your local artists is supporting culture, is supporting the future of the arts, and that's very important. Jack mentioned growing up on a farm and chicken behavior and things of that nature, and it made me think about this poem that I am going to share with you all today, and it's titled "Reality Awaits When We Awake." This from Convenient Amnesia. I'm going to talk a little bit about the cover art shortly, but I do want to read this poem. Part of this poem was written in regards to my grandmother. It's also a golden shovel form poem that uses the poem from William Carlos Williams, "So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens." And this idea of chickens and this image of chickens on the farm, and then my grandma's upbringing and her relationship with chicken. And I think I had a conversation very recently about the survival of food and that survival of politics. And that was actually with Jack, but here's this poem for my grandmother, with her in my thoughts, but for Frank Bedard. When we don't dream, we die. So close your eyes, sacrifice your inhibitions. Much of faith's understanding and meaning depends upon our mental activity, completion of tasks, upon movement, upon memory. A moment, a white bus ran a red light. You screamed, Jesus, gave him the wheel, and your will was done. Later, you filled a barrow full of weeds, then trim hedges from your garden, glazed over from dew an 80-year-old perspiration with songs of sing the king soon. When it rains, it pours, Grandma. Forgetting is Sandy and Katrina. Water drowns the itsy spider, yet saves our soul. Beside the sin of superstition, aside from questioning the story when coworkers believe you were born white, or you'd be heading home soon and there'd be no more fried chickens. So I did just want to share that poem because it again puts me in that mindset. Art is always in conversation. The visual art is always in conversation with the lyrical art. The lyrical is always in tune with our sound and music. And so that's going to be something very important to just carry along this theme tonight, is this celebration of the arts, because that's what the eighth trust means to me. So our next speaker is going to be Aysha Akthar. I enjoyed chatting with Aysha Akthar. You'll get to see some of the recording after of our conversation. But one of the things that I wasn't able to touch on while she was with us is her myriad of experiences, her worldly experiences, are also looking at her as an Army veteran, and her work and how a lot of her passion is creating realistic and probable change. And just listening to Ellie talk about her work was amazing. So Aysha Akthar, MD, MPH, is the co-founder, president, and CEO of Center for Contemporary Sciences for the Replacement of Animal Testing, and the author of Our Symphony with Animals, a book that deftly combines medicine, social history, and personal experience to examine how deeply the well-being of humans and animals are intertwined, and how interspecies empathy enriches our well-being. A double board certified neurologist in preventive medicine, public health specialist, as well as a U.S. veteran and former medical officer at the Food and Drug Administration. She is also a fellow at the Oxford Center for Animal Ethics and a TEDx speaker who uses her background now in the work of demonstrating how there is a mutual benefit to both humans and animals when animals are protected. Aysha is also an avid gardener and artist, both of what we share together. However, her art, she donates the proceeds from sales of her paintings to the work of replacing animal testing for creating humane and compassionate solutions. Aysha Akthar is also this year's recipient of the Compassion Arts Festival 2021 Artist for Ahimsa Award. You can find more about her at her email address, website, www.ayshaakthar.com. I'll make sure you can find that in the notes of this video and the contact and websites of all our other speakers. With no further ado, I'm going to look forward to sharing this presentation with you all. Make sure you have that popcorn ready if you haven't made it yet.
All right, let me just share my screen here. Okay, and okay, so a lot of people don't really know too much about how animals are used in experimentation. And so what I'm going to do today is just give a very, very brief overview of some of the major issues. But if you want any more information in more detail, we definitely have some longer presentations, hour-long presentations, if you'd like to get some more information. So the title of my talk is How Can We End Animal Testing and Better Human Health? If we were to estimate how many animals are used worldwide, the best guess we have is that at least 200 million animals are used each year. And the reason why we have to guess is because, quite frankly, there is very, very little transparency on this subject. Most of the top animal experimentation nations, including the US, do not really give the numbers of how many animals are used. They don't really give how they are used. They don't really give information about how much of our tax dollars are used. And a lot of our tax dollars in the United States does go towards using animals in experimentation. Now, given that, in the US, we think the number is more than 100 million animals used each year. And again, this is an estimate. This number could be much more, but I doubt it's any less. And the top 3 animal testing nations are the US, Japan, and China. And it's very likely that China has actually surpassed the US as being the top nation for animal experimentation. But if you think we have little transparency here in the US, we have even less when it comes to the animals used and how many are used in China. In the US, we can look at the number of animals and the types of animals used that are covered under the Animal Welfare Act. And I'll go into that a little bit further in the next slide. But for those animals which are covered under the Animal Welfare Act, those species, here's a breakdown of the species used and the numbers of animals in each category in 2018. This was by the US Department of Agriculture. So you can see that about almost 60,000 dogs were used in 2018. That number is about consistent in 2019 as well. A significant number of guinea pigs are used. Non-human primates, almost 71,000 non-human primates were used. Pigs are actually increasingly being used, and they're increasingly being used perhaps in place of dogs, in part, if not in large part, because there's less of a PR issue, meaning that the public is less concerned about the welfare of pigs than they are about dogs, cats, and maybe non-human primates. So it's not, pigs are not increasingly being used because they are more like humans, but because they are less of an issue when it comes to public thoughts about animal experimentation. Now, in 2018, of the species that are covered under the Animal Welfare Act, about 310,000 were classified as being involved in procedures that involved pain. Now, this is up to the laboratories to classify whether the animals were involved in procedures that involve pain. And there is good reason to believe that this is a very much of an underestimation of the number of animals involved in painful procedures. And of those animals that have been classified as being involved in painful procedures, about 60,000 were involved, received pain, but were given no pain alleviation whatsoever. And again, we think this is an underestimation. And even for those animals that do receive some pain alleviation, there's been a significant concern that they are still being undertreated for their pain and their suffering. Now, just want to make a point. These are just the animals covered under the Animal Welfare Act. So let's get into that act a little bit more. Now, the Animal Welfare Act is the only federal statute in the US that regulates the treatments of animals used in experiments. A couple of important things to note. It excludes the majority of animals used in experimentation. It includes more than 95% of the animals used. So it includes mice, rats, birds, animals used in agricultural experiments, reptiles and invertebrates, and cold-blooded non-mammals. So it excludes the majority of animals used in experimentation, and the majority of animals are not counted. We don't know how many of them are involved in painful procedures, how many of them are given any kind of pain alleviation, and I would guarantee that it's worse for these animals than it even is for those species which are covered under the Animal Welfare Act. Now, even for those species which are covered under the Animal Welfare Act, this act is pretty dismal. it's really not a protection in the way people think. It's more like a checklist approach to animal care. So if I'm a laboratory and I'm using dogs, I'm using beagles, I'm using non-human primates in my laboratory, I have to say, yes, the dogs are given some chance to run a little bit each day, or the cage size is of a certain size. And yes, I do provide food and water, things like that. But let me give you a very, very important point. The Animal Welfare Act provides no limits on what can be done to animals, no matter the degree of pain and suffering. And this is extremely important for people to know. There is no limit on what can and arguably has been done to animals. Animals are routinely burned alive, irradiated, given painful diseases, shocked, electrocuted, dismembered, have their brains crushed, their spinal cords crushed, you name it. Just about anything has arguably been done to animals in the name of research. Now, so even for those animals which are covered under the Animal Welfare Act, this regulation is pretty dismal. And even for those few things that laboratories are supposed to do, like providing food and water, if the researcher thinks that providing food will interfere with their study outcomes, they don't have to provide food. They can starve the animals. They can withhold water. They can withhold, or they can keep animals in a specific, a smaller cage size, and so on. So there is no limit really on what amount of harm and pain and suffering an animal can experience in the name of research. Unfortunately, I've been involved as an animal advocate for more than 30 years, since I was in high school, and I've been working hard to try to move the narrative about animal experimentation and to advocate for the replacement of animals in experimentation. And the unfortunate the problem is that most of the efforts to replace animal testing has been based on the animal suffering. And of course, I care deeply about that, and most people, and many people do. But the problem is that it really hasn't resulted in any significant change in the numbers of animals using experimentation. In fact, the numbers of animals used is increasing worldwide. So an animal advocacy-based approach hasn't really worked. It may work in the regards to removing a few types of species, such as chimpanzees, or worked in cosmetic testing, or if many people have heard about recent concerns about the use of beagles, it may work as far as getting beagles out of experiments, but just other species will be used in place of those chimpanzees, beagles, and other animals that may which may not be used as much because of animal advocacy approaches. And so the main bulk of how animals are used and where they're used and for what reasons they are used continues, and the numbers of animals used in those areas continues to grow. So that experience and a few other experiences has caused me to reframe the ethics. Now, this is a picture of my dad, my Abu, drinking his cup of tea. And my dad has suffered from diabetes since his early 20s. Now, as a result of his diabetes, he frequently gets a flare-up of a nerve pain. It's called neuropathy. And if anyone's ever experienced a nerve pain in this form, like a neuropathy, it's very different, very uncomfortable kind of pain. It's not the typical pain that most people experience. Now, I've had to see him suffer again and again from flare-ups of neuropathy without being able to offer him any medication that really is helpful. I worked at the Food and Drug Administration for a decade, and I saw promising drugs and vaccines that everyone, I can't tell you how many times, everyone was so excited about. All right, now this is the drug. This is going to be the great breakthrough for stroke, or this is going to be the next vaccine that's going to prevent HIV. We've seen so many come through the pipeline again and again, only for them to fail when tried in humans. And then when I was a deputy director of the Army's Traumatic Brain Injury Program, the truth was we had to the best we could do to offer soldiers who suffer from brain injury, which is a big issue in the military worldwide, is to offer what's called supportive care, meaning at best we can give them some help to alleviate some of the symptoms as a result of brain injury. But we have no treatment for the brain injury itself. We have no cure for brain injury. We have no effective treatment, despite the fact that millions of dollars and arguably hundreds and maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of animals have had their heads bashed in for this type of experimentation. So my personal experience and my professional experience has really caused me to ask, not only is animal experimentation ethical for animals, which of course it is not, but is it even ethical for humans? And to really answer that question, we have to ask, is it an effective use of our resources, and does animal experimentation reliably inform human health? I'm just going to give you just a very brief overview of some of the evidence that clearly gives the answer no. Animal experimentation is not an effective use of our resources. So if we look at drug development alone, the Food and Drug Administration is the regulatory body in the United States that approves a drug or vaccine to be used in the market. Now, with rare exception, the FDA requires all new drugs and vaccines to be tested on at least 2 different species before moving into human clinical trials. The thing is, though, that 90 to 95% of the drugs and vaccines that pass the animal test, that are found safe and effective in the animal test, end up failing when tried in humans. They fail mostly because they're ineffective and unsafe. Now, animal testing isn't the only cause for this high failure rate, but it is a significant cause of this high failure rate. And that's because the way medicine is practiced today, regardless of what role animal testing may have had in medicine in the past, we're now looking at subtle nuances of molecular biology and genetic expression and so on. And even small differences between species can have a profound impact on whether a drug or a vaccine is going to be safe or effective in humans. And if we looked at just a couple of examples, if we think about stroke, so there have been more than 700 experiments in animals in which treatments were found effective. About 150 of these were tried in human clinical trials, and not one has worked in humans, not one. If we look at HIV vaccine researchers have for decades been trying to create a vaccine that will prevent HIV. More than 85 vaccines have been found effective in animal experiments. Most of these, if not all, involve non-human primates. And until relatively recently, when chimpanzee use was largely disfavored, they include using chimpanzees as well. So think about this. This is our closest genetic cousins. Now, out of those, more than 30 have been tried in humans, and not one has proven effective in humans. In fact, 2 vaccines were actually found to increase the risk of HIV in humans. And just last year, another vaccine yet again failed when tried in humans. It was found to work. There was good reports of success in non-human primates and in other animals for which this vaccine was tried, and it failed yet again in humans. Now, just this one vaccine cost us more than $100 million, most of it our tax dollars, and more than 10 years was spent just on organizing the human clinical trials alone. Think of how much better those resources could have been put to use. So if I were to just kind of summarize the human harms that come about from animal experimentation, I would say there are three main human harms. The first is that adverse events occur in humans that are not predicted by animal tests. So about 30% of the vaccines and drugs that fail in humans fail because of safety problems that were not found in animal testing. And there's a recent analysis that suggests that adverse events to drugs is the 4th leading cause of mortality in the US. I don't know if that's actually fully accurate, but the fact is that adverse events to drugs is a leading cause. If it's not the 4th, it is a leading cause of hospitalization and mortality in the United States. The other major way that ineffective animal testing can harm us is that think about all the time, money, resources, and arguably brilliant minds, that are going towards animal testing that could instead be going towards coming up with better methods and better ways to study human biology and find the treatments we need. And then the third human harm that can result from ineffective animal testing is missed opportunity. Now, but by this, what I mean is that we now know how poorly predictive animal testing is, how poor it is in telling us whether a drug or vaccine is going to work or is going to be safe in humans. Now, think about how many drugs and vaccines were never progressed through the pipeline because of misleading tests on animals. How many drugs and vaccines never went further than the animal testing phase, but would have worked and would have been safe in humans? And there's an increasing concern that we may have, or researchers and drug developers may have actually thrown out cures or effective treatments that would have worked, would have been safe in humans, but they were abandoned because of misleading studies in animals. So I'm happy to say that I'm now heading up the Center for Contemporary Sciences. We launched just last year, just as the pandemic started, and our mission is to save and improve all lives, human and non-human, by catalyzing the world's transition to human-specific medical research. And what this means is that there's been a kind of a revolution in some ways in testing methods. There's been an increasing recognition among many in the biomedical research industry, not everyone, but among many, that animal testing is really not very effective, not very reliable, and that we need to get back to studying human biology. I mean, it makes sense. If we want to study human biology and find treatments for human diseases, we need to be studying human biology, not the biology of a rat or a dog or a monkey or a cat. And so there have been many innovative testing methods that have come about, especially in the last 10 years, that are really kind of changing the way we think about, in many areas, of how we approach medical research. And they're sophisticated testing methods that are based on human biology. And if anyone wants to learn more, you can come to our website and learn more about some of these new methods that are coming to the fore. And we could be further along if we put more of our resources and more of our effort, more of our time, tax dollars and so on, into creating and inventing even newer, even better human-specific medical research methods. So what we do at the Center for Contemporary Sciences is that we're trying to create an ecosystem that is really ready and ripe to replace animal testing with better methods. So we do this by educating the next generation. We're currently creating curriculum to help educate up and coming scientists, the next generation of scientists, in more of these innovative testing methods that not only can replace the use of animals, but can actually be more effective and more reliable in helping us find the treatments that we need. We work on changing policy. We are the scientific lead on a new policy that was just introduced into the Senate in October. It's called the FDA Modernization Act of 2021. Cory Booker is the Democrat lead, and Rand Paul is the Republican lead. And so it's a bipartisan introduction of this new bill. And what it does is it just goes back to some original policy governing over or overseeing the FDA that just changes the word animal to non-clinical. So basically what it does is it just expands the types of methods that a drug or vaccine developer can use and that the FDA can accept. It doesn't take away animal testing, because if we were trying to do that at this point, it would never pass. But it opens up the types of methods that can be used. It basically catches up with the science, because the science is changing and we need policy and regulations that change along with science. A third solution that we are promoting is the need to change the narrative. And this goes back to one of the first few slides I presented about how an animal advocacy-based approach, unfortunately, really hasn't had a significant impact. So we should change the narrative, and actually we can change the narrative because the science is showing that we must change the narrative. So not only should we change the narrative to really talk just about animal suffering, but also to talk about the human suffering that comes about from an ineffective medical research system. So think about all those drugs and vaccines, all the years and years that go into them, people with ALS, people with stroke, people with HIV, people with so many diseases, thinking that this next drug or vaccine is going to be the breakthrough that they're looking for, and then only for that drug or vaccine to flop when tried in humans. Instead, you think about all those people who are waiting desperately for treatment. So there's a lot of human suffering that comes about from a very ineffective and largely unreliable testing system. So we can change the narrative and must change the narrative to show that moving away from animal testing not only is better for animals, it's also better for humans. And then lastly, we work to increase investment and funding. So we work with some investment groups and connect them with companies that are creating these more human-based testing methods. And then of course, the largest funders of animal testing is our government. And so, and that's our tax dollars. So we want to work on changing how our government funds medical research. So instead of putting so much money into animal testing, it starts to put more and more funding into more innovative, potentially better, more effective, much more predictive testing methods. And so with that, I'll just stop. And here's my contact information. This is my little Nessie with her little soccer ball. And I'll just stop sharing the slide at this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aysha. It's interesting to see and learn more about animal testing. I think that when we hear animal testing, there are so many different things that come to mind. For example, we might solely think about cosmetic testing, but not even thinking about vaccines and things like that. And so really just important work that you do, which brings me, I just have a few questions, but I wanted to know, what can I do on an individual level, right? So I know my tax dollars, based on your presentation, go to the funding of animal testing, but what is this, if I'm also new to this, what's something that I can do right now, just to have a small, immediate kind of impact on my own community?
Sure, thank you. And one thing you can do is really share information with your community. So you can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Who knows what else will be next, but please share the information that we post. The more people become educated and aware about the problems with animal testing, the more we can actually start to change the system. If anyone's interested in supporting our work, of course, we always welcome that. And then another thing I always ask people is, when you see in the mainstream media, I will say mainstream media has been really bad about this issue. They really do, they pit it, that old narrative. It's animal protection versus human protection, right? You care more about a rat or you care about your child. And that narrative no longer works because it's not accurate, it's not right. But the media is still behind. So when you see articles in the media, anything concerning animal testing, please, 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 especially if you see a way to publicly comment, a post, just please post something. Please, I beg everyone to please post a comment saying that they need to start becoming more unbiased in their approach, and they need to start talking about the problems with animal testing. You can copy and paste anything from our website and use it again. I don't care. Plagiarize us, use it again and again, use the same language again and again. It doesn't matter. So those are a couple of things that you can do, or anyone can do today.
Okay, thank you. I see a lot of online and digital activism, especially in the vegan community when I think of Instagram. So sharing is caring, and we need to care more about like our future and also other sentient beings. So thank you. My next question is, I know you do a little bit of art, and I'm big fan of art. Me and my wife love art, but one of the questions I had to ask about that is, what does your artwork like kind of aim to say? And also, what stories do you hope to tell with your artwork?
Thank you. I see the beautiful artwork behind you. I was wondering if that's yours, if you do it.
The only thing I have an art of is running my mouth, but this is a photographer by the name of Aaron Ricketts, based out of Philadelphia.
Oh, okay, it's beautiful. Thank you so much. So yeah, I've been doing artwork all my life, and it was always, I need that creative outlet. And increasingly, I've been kind of moving into different directions and exploring different techniques with my artwork. Some of the themes are just because the world is so full of suffering and angst and misery in some ways. I often use my artwork to kind of depict the nicer side of our world, the whimsical, the beautiful, things like that. And that includes animals. So I'm working on a new series about animals and showcasing the beauty of animals and in their own environments, showcasing the beauty of relationships between humans and other animals. So that's one of the things I'm doing. And the work, when any sales that come from the artwork helps to support my work at Center for Contemporary Sciences.
Yeah, that's something that you're going to hear me saying often on this playback is please support the artist. Please purchase the artwork. I think that's very important. We love supporting artists here. So I'm going to keep pushing that message throughout, especially because the art goes to a good cause. I think it's very important to highlight, animals in their like happy states, because so many times we see things under duress or, like you mentioned, stress. And I think really celebrating the beauty of these creatures are very important. So thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I'm energized. I'll be checking out the website. I'll be sharing some on my own personal account today. So just wanted to say thank you. And also congratulations on being the 2021 Artist for Ahimsa Award through Compassion Arts Festival. I'm not sure if you were aware of that, but it is a part of your bio. And I'm just honored. Every year I get to learn from the different Ahimsa Award people and kind of what they're working on, their projects and their passions. So it's been a pleasure chatting with you and learning more about you and your work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I am aware of the award and I'm truly honored.
All righty. Yes. Congratulations. Thank you. You have a great day.
You as well.
All righty. Welcome back, everybody. That was such a beautiful, beautiful, inspirational, educational, informational presentation by check out their website. I think it's more important that you do that. I'm gonna read a poem that is, reminds me of animal testing and things of that nature. But one of the things that I wanted to do first was share a quote with you all. And this quote comes from Dick Gregory. And the quote reads, "Because I am a civil rights activist, I'm also an animal rights activist. Animals and humans suffer and die alike. Violence causes the same pain, the same spilling of blood, the same stench of death, the same arrogant, cruel, and vicious taking of life. We shouldn't be part of it." And that's my favorite vegan, Dick Gregory. So when I went vegan, I used this work. But this poem is titled Black Fish. And again, it's from Convenient Amnesia. It's for John Michel Basquiat, another artist. "Even the tar black fishes are marked by blues, battered and venerable, animus to the oxygen of our human errors. Yet the fish still hangs still in suspense. This school of fish was not caught, but ate through the bait up the fishing line, up through the hook, hungry for acceptance into an unweaning and weary world. I find humor posthumously, for I am God in the gallery, but just another fish in the sea. And so, again, I think art is very reflective of our experiences with the world, something that you're going to hear echoed a little later in our program. Sentient Media is a nonprofit journalism organization that seeks to create transparency around the use of animals in our daily lives, from food to companionship to laboratory test subjects. Sentient Media specializes in report and training programs for emerging writers, partnerships with news outlets, and strategic digital marketing. A uniquely important and invaluable resource for information about animals, animal agriculture, the environment, justice, and culture. Sentient Media's Writers Collective and social media fellowship programs work to encourage, support, and advance the work of people wishing to use their voice for advocacy and change. Their website is www.sentientmedia.org. Anna Bradley, their executive director, is a social justice advocate who believes that meaningful content can make the future meaningful, whatever the medium. Her background is in content production and startup consultancy in London, where she founded digital agency pypr.co.uk and worked with global clients and corporations for over a decade to help build dedicated digital communities. She transitioned to serve the nonprofit space in 2018 to work with organizations focused on building gender balance in the tech funder and founder landscapes. Now, you've already got your popcorn. If you don't have your popcorn, go cut up some fruit. Go get some oranges, because this one is going to be a very juicy presentation. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce the next guest in this 8th Trust Symposium, Sentient Media.
Hi, I'm Anna Bradley, Executive Director of Sentient Media, and I'm very excited to share some of our work with you all today. Thanks for inviting me to speak. So I came to Sentient Media by way of many years in community building and content strategy and production in a small agency called Piper I set up in London and Brighton. But when I joined Sentient Media in 2020, I was not prepared for how much I would learn about how bound up animals are in every single aspect of our lives, from food to makeup to clothes to transport. And within a couple of months of being at Sentient Media, I was absolutely convinced of the importance of an organization like this. So the reason I believe that a group or an organization like Sentient Media is so important is that essentially food is everything. Considering how much we produce and how much we consume and its outsized impact on our planet and on our health, we don't know a whole lot about how our food systems operate. We don't know why we can buy these burgers for £1 or $1, or what it means when a label says cage-free. And we don't know this because mainstream media underreports these incredibly important stories. And when it comes to climate crisis, we're more likely to see coverage of the damage of aviation than industrial agriculture. And in fact, in 2019, 2020, we did a study that found that aviation's impact on the planet is reported on up to 120 times more than the impact of animal agriculture, despite only accounting for 2.6 to 5% of greenhouse gas emissions, much lower than industrial animal agriculture by any measurement. We're looking at least 20% that government authorities have agreed on. So at Sentient Media, we want to balance the scales, and we specialize in reporting and training emerging writers to get articles placed in mainstream outlets. And we also do strategic digital marketing. And through all of this, we bring this fact-led information about farmed animal lives to the first page of Google, where people are asking these questions. So this is a little recap of what we've done over the last 12 months. We have transformed the first page of Google with pro-animal content. So essentially, when people are looking for answers to questions, millions of people every day will Google, what is plant-based meat? What is protein? How do vegans get protein? What is animal cruelty? All of these things. And we want to make sure that our movement's message is there at the front and center, able to give a pro-animal life answer to these important questions. In fact, our content articles that we've helped produce or prepare or outline now appear in the top 3 search results in Google for over 1,300 terms, which means that this is we're making a great impact on transforming that first page of Google. The next thing that we do is we continue to report on the impact of animal agriculture and exploitation. So this is an example of stories that we've published over the last year. We cover stories that center animal lives from many different angles. You know, animal suffering, as I said, is bound up with so many aspects of our lives. We've identified a few key areas. So we focus on culture, justice, big ag, and the environment, and COVID, when COVID was exploding all over the media. So this is where the role of animal exploitation is massively underreported. So we try to find the intersections, and we celebrate when writers come to us with ideas that bring together these different aspects of justice and social justice, and because animal lives are so bound up within it all. In fact, we've actually published over 300 articles in the last 12 months. And one area that's incredibly important to us is in animal rights and in journalism. People of the global majority are massively underrepresented. So we've worked with many writers, and we're happy to say that at least 38% of the content we've produced in the last 12 months is authored by people of the global majority. As a journalism organisation, it's definitely our responsibility to make sure we're including voices outside of what's normally published. We've also launched these closer look campaigns. So we've had 12 weeks of dedicated coverage, 1 week each month of the year, where we do videos, articles, podcasts, and we take a deep dive into all these different aspects. So we had life at sea, social justice, carbon emissions, meat, money, and politics. So this is an example of the kind of type of editorial that we want to see more of. We want to see more articles along these lines getting published in Sentient Media and in the mainstream. So the third thing that we do is we educate social justice advocates. So we have 3 programs: the Writers Collective, Social Media Fellowship, and a Sentient Media Journalism Fund. So our Writers Collective is funded largely by animal charity evaluators, who are a great funding body. It's an online community where anybody interested in writing, particularly those interested in writing the kind of articles I've been speaking about, can come together and learn from each other. And we have many, many courses that are all free for you to take. We have weekly events, we have one-to-one mentorship opportunities, and we accept applications for the Writers Collective on a rolling basis. So I encourage you to apply, and that's at sentientmedia.org. The Social Media Fellowship is funded by Veg Fund. So for this, we select 10 high-impact advocates across the globe, and we offer a 6 weeks training in social media and leadership. And then we work with that group to recruit their own volunteers and go through the process with them. So this year we've served about 100 people on this program, and we launched a 30-day campaign called 100 Voices, where each group had the opportunity to share their stories about the food system where they're based. So we have some great stories from Bolivia, Hungary, Mexico, India, and more. So we're going to be looking for our next cohort of 10 high-impact volunteers in January 2022. So far this year, we've served 350 advocates as part of our collective and our social media fellowship program. Again, 47% of these advocates we've served are people of the global majority, making sure that our community is there and supportive to people whose voices otherwise go unheard. We're actually in 30 different countries, which is a great achievement for us. And so far this year, we've offered 11,000 hours of mentorship. So we're really pleased about that as well. Then there's finally the Sentient Media Journalism Fund. So this was made possible by Timmy and John Sobrato and Stray Dog Institute. And this fund is exclusively for those who are underrepresented in animal rights and/or journalism. So as I've said, we have a problem across these 2 spaces. And as an organization, we bridge this, and we're determined to support those voices who are often ignored. So as part of this inaugural fund, which is just launched, we have 17 aspiring journalists from USA, Nigeria, Mexico, India, Trinidad and Tobago, Spain, Zimbabwe, Thailand, Venezuela, all of whom are receiving mentorship and training and $600 in stipends to help them achieve their writing goals. And we're hoping to launch the second fund in the new year. So keep an eye out on our website, on our social media, and on our newsletter. So We share a lot of stories that shine a light on our relationship with animals. And of course, this can be really hard for many people who work in animal advocacy, who are impacted. And sometimes it can be a little bit depressing. You know, I find this myself as well. So how do we maintain hope and focus on the mission at hand? Well, it's my belief, like I said at the start, that food is everything, essential for all life on Earth. But right now, by allowing an industry, the meat and dairy industry, to dictate what we eat, by allowing control to fall into the hands of a few organizations, a few corporations, the food that is so essential for our lives is actually destroying it instead. So the future of all life on Earth and the planet itself will be decided by the choices we make today. And whilst that might sound a little bit depressing, I think that each choice that we make can make a difference. So my journey into questioning what's on my plate began with a piece of media. It was a picture, in fact, when I was 6 years old. And actually, the media has an impact on many people. It begins and starts with seeing something, with learning something, with being educated, whether it's an article or a documentary or an image. So what keeps me focused and what gives me hope is that I truly believe that the more that we tell these stories, the more we place these articles in mainstream outlets, the more likely we are to encourage people to begin to question what's on their plate and ultimately impact their choices to change the way we consume in order to protect this future, the future of ourselves, of our own species, and the future of all life on Earth. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more or you wish to write about these issues, if you want to start telling these stories that are so often unheard, then please reach out to me, Anna, that's ANA, @sentientmedia.org. And thank you so much for listening. Please enjoy the rest of the event.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Please sign up. We need more storytellers. We need more writers. We need to get this information out there. We're going to keep things rolling because you've already got your snacks with you all. Thank you for joining us. Let me just take 1 minute to say, if you have the time, check out my Instagram post. I posted about a fundraiser that I'm personally doing for the Thanksgiving holidays, giving some donations through Instagram to Farm Sanctuary. I think about the turkeys that are currently being pardoned and what happens to those turkeys. I think about a lot of these birds who are also sentient beings and need our help, but just animal on farms in general need our help. So just wanted to take that plug. If I see some donations come through, you know, I'll shout you out, but I appreciate you. I appreciate everything that you do for the animals, even if it's attending this 8th Trust Symposium. So After Animals is a podcast that uncovers trends and stories at the cutting edge of the global post-animal movement. What does a future look like in which food, fashion, and entertainment no longer have to exploit animals to be successful? Each podcast episode shares a remarkable and inspiring story about someone who is forging a more compassionate future for us all. Created by producers and hosts Ilara Nakagawa, Sharanya Krishna Prasad, After Animals seeks to activate a kinder, more compassionate world through innovation. Their website is www.afteranimals.com, and we are so excited to have them with us for this 8th Trust event.
Hello, everyone. First, we want to thank the organizers of the Compassion Arts Festival for inviting us to be part of this year's event. We are so excited to be here. I'm Sharanya.
And I'm Lara, and we are the hosts and producers of the After Animals podcast.
You gave us some great questions to work with for this presentation, so we're going to go dive right in. The first one we received is, what is the After Animals podcast and how did it come to be? Why did we want to create a podcast like this?
So After Animals is a podcast series that uncovers trends and stories at the cutting edge of the global post-animal movement.
What does a future look like in which food, fashion, and entertainment no longer have to exploit animals to be successful?
In each episode, we share a remarkable and inspiring story about someone who is forging a more compassionate future for us all. After Animals seeks to activate a kinder, more compassionate world through innovation.
Yeah, and when Sharanya and I met a few years back, right away we bonded over our shared passion and commitment to animal advocacy. I also come from a journalism, PR, and communications background and have seen firsthand how the media and online space in general has gotten so crowded, especially with the rise of digital. The consequence of all this noise is that many important voices end up getting drowned out. We both felt we wanted to make sure that some of the most inspiring leaders around the world had a way to share their stories with like-minded others about their mission and their work. Now, these are people who are truly going to help us decrease animal suffering significantly and build a more compassionate future for the world.
And through After Animals, we really want to share with people more about these really cool emerging technologies out there that could end animal exploitation and have all these other positive outcomes. These are things like cat food being made from real mouse meat in a laboratory, but without needing to kill a single mouse. Or real human breast milk also being made in a lab to replace cow milk-based formulas.
Or tiny little human replica organs, including brains and hearts, that we can experiment on instead of on animals like monkeys, pigs, or rabbits, because tragically, 90% of drugs tested on animals fail in human tests anyways.
The second question we received is what kinds of stories or guests does After Animals cover, and how is After Animals different from other podcasts about issues about animals?
Yeah, thank you for this great question. Well, right from the start, we hope to be different from other podcasts in that we really wanted to create one that made sense to people like us. So Sharanya and I were both sensitive animal advocates who are deeply affected by troubling issues impacting them, whether it's the incredible cruelty faced by animals in massive industries like cosmetics for testing, or factory farming in which they are raised and killed for food in unimaginably deprived conditions. That said, we also know how tired and burnt out we're all getting from seeing and hearing about all of these tragic and sometimes totally overwhelming animal issues around the world.
So we thought, let's address these issues, but in a super forward-looking and positive way, so we can build shared hope and learn from the brave, purpose-driven leaders and innovators around the world who are not just sitting around getting paralyzed by futility or compassion fatigue and are actually doing something about it.
Totally. And the third great question you gave us is, when sharing stories in your podcast about innovation and creativity that can shape creating a more compassionate world for animals, this might also include information on how these new ideas greatly differ from the often painful, shocking realities of the way animals are used in the status quo right now. How do you balance these two things in the podcast, and how do you balance this awareness in life?
Again, a great question. Thank you for this. In terms of the podcast, we try to focus on the positives. We do cover a bit of the reality that the animals are facing, but we try not to dwell on it. The whole reason we started the podcast was to avoid compassion fatigue ourselves and to give us something positive to look at, what the world would be like in the future after we stop using and abusing animals. Hence our podcast's name, After Animals.
Yeah, and on a more personal level, for me, the only way I've been able to not get too affected by the many painful, shocking realities is by taking actions, even really small ones, like whether it's signing an online petition or making a plant-based dinner for a friend, or starting a podcast like this one to try and build a community of like-minded people. Eventually, these things start to build and new opportunities come to take more actions as your network and reputation grows. It really harkens back to the famous starfish on the beach story, which I'm sure many, if not most of you have heard, but for those of you who haven't, just a quick refresher. So there's a man walking in an early morning on the beach with his dog. It's still quite dark out. The sun is barely rising. And he's walking and he sees ahead of him a young woman doing kind of crazy exercises, he thinks. And as he gets closer to her, he realizes that what she's actually doing is picking up things off the sand and throwing them far into the ocean. And so curiosity begins to overwhelm him, and he gets closer to her and he says, "Hey, just wondering, what are you doing?" And she says, "Oh, well, on days like this, when I know the sun is going to be very bright and the tide low, all these starfish that have washed up on the beach overnight will dry out and die. And so I come here and I save as many as I can." And he looks up and down the shoreline and he sees that it's miles long, and he sees, he can see little starfish everywhere. And he says, "Well, but there's so many of them. Like, does it really make a difference?" And she opens her hand and she's got this beautiful red starfish in it. And she says, "Well, it makes a difference to this one." And she flings it far out into the ocean. And so, it is kind of cliche, but every little bit counts. And not acting is sometimes always worse than taking one small step towards compassion.
Yes, what a wonderful story. The final question that we received was, this festival program is about the 8th trust tenet, having the courage of our convictions in relationship to our treatment of animals and the earth. How are the guests who you interview for After Animals a reflection of this tenet? And what does having the courage of our convictions mean for you personally?
Yeah, we love this tenet. It gave us good food for thought. So absolutely, we would say that our guests are a reflection of this. Many of our guests started in a totally different career field. So like Phaedra, the founder of the plant-based cheese company Sparrow, she was an engineer at Facebook before she decided to follow her passion and be a mission-driven food entrepreneur. And then there's Christy Lagali, who was a successful jet engineer at Boeing before she decided to pursue her life's purpose to help animals. And so she founded Rebellious Foods, which is now one of the most successful plant-based chicken companies out there. And many of our guests, like Phaedra and Christy, they share stories with us on the show about how they had the courage and the conviction to go from having just a job, and well-paying, successful jobs, towards a far more risky and scary path, but one that is definitely more impactful for animals, health, and the planet. And here's the thing. They're all so grounded in their purpose that they have such conviction. You can just hear it in their voices. And they tell us how different they feel now doing this type of work. So it's really amazing and inspiring. And I'd say that the majority, if not all of our guests, have shared similar stories with us.
Yeah, and some companies were created as their founders were trying to fill a void that existed without turning to animal cruelty-filled items available in grocery stores today. For example, one of our guests, Darko Mandic, worked at one of the world's largest traditional honey companies. But when he turned vegan, he had to question the very industry that he was a part of. So he had the courage and conviction to stay true to his values and has created his own company that's creating the world's first bee-free honey. And they've recently created some buzz as they were selected as one of Time's best inventions of 2021. And this is exactly why we set out to help people like Darko and all of our other guests share their stories with you. The stories aren't always rosy, and many have gone through their own difficulties and journeys, but we hope that they could provide inspiration and sometimes roadmaps even for others to start building their own conviction towards ending the abuse of animals.
Yes, and even for people considering going into these fields, our interviewees definitely get into things like sharing career advice on how to be successful as an entrepreneur or raise funds, or even being a female in a predominantly male-dominated industry. So we're just so glad again to be here as part of the Compassion Arts Festival this year. Thank you so much again for having us.
And please go to our website, afteranimals.com, where you can link to your favorite podcast program to listen to our episodes, learn more, or even reach out to us. We love hearing ideas for future episodes, and we'd love to get feedback from you all.
Thank you so much. I have a ton of ideas. First idea, we need to get Mr. Hip, also known as Moi, on your show to just have a great and wonderful conversation. Thank you for that beautiful presentation. I can't wait to check out that podcast. I'm learning so much. I've learned so much today, and thinking about the EIGHTH Trust and this courage of our own convictions through highlighting how, creativity, artistry, and veganism can be tools for advancing positive social change. You've seen so many artists, so many spokespeople, so many researchers and studiers of culture who are out here trying to be the change that they wish to be in the world. And I just think that's beautiful. But this next presentation is going to be our last for the evening. I'll follow up with a few poems. However, I do want to preface, this is a great interview. I learned so much about art, the process. Just support your local artists. That's all I can say. Alise Eastgate is a painter, designer, illustrator, and muralist who uses her work to explore our connections to nature and the right of all living beings to live, love, and be free. She's exhibited work in solo and group shows and live painted at events and festivals throughout California and, get this, the Fiji Islands. She's also an exhibitor in the virtual group exhibit, The Fifth Trust. And those artworks for the Fifth Trust are just so amazing. Please check them out. I don't want to talk too highly of it to get your hopes up, but just check it out. You'll be amazed. Her biggest creative project is being a mama and raising a conscious, compassionate little human. When she's not nurturing her family, art, or garden, she utilizes her other superpowers to innovate and streamline nonprofit operations. All of her work seem to envision and create a more just and peaceful world. She's the second half of Eastrand Studios. I need you to clap it up, give a round of applause for our next presenter, Alise Eastgate. All righty, welcome back, everyone. We have the illustrious Alise Eastgate with us, the second part or the duo of Eastrand Studios. I'm excited to have Alise with us, and I hope her insight on veganism and her artwork truly does inspire you all to really think about what you put into your bodies and things of that nature. So my first question is going to be the same first question that I asked Jack. It's going to be, how long have you been vegan and living a compassionate lifestyle?
I will say I've been vegan since I went vegan in 2013. I had been before that vegetarian and pescatarian, basically on and off since I was about 5. And so the actual going vegan and like learning what that meant was 2013.
Yeah.
I think it's and then living a compassionate lifestyle, like how you asked that separate. Because I don't know, I'm still learning how to do that today. I would tell you, like, this year I started living a compassionate lifestyle because I think sometimes in veganism, we talk about compassion being really specific as dealing with animals. And I also work in reproductive justice. And I think we talk about compassion being something really different there. And everybody has their little like window of it. And then there's self-compassion, and there's all of those other layers, which I feel like I'm still learning that. So I've been unpacking and working on a compassionate lifestyle my whole life. And I feel like I'm still getting there.
Okay, yeah, I'm like, it's a constant thing, you know. I'm like, well, you mean to tell me I can't wear this? Like, so yeah, we're always learning. If you don't mind me asking, I'm actually going to ask a little bit more about the reproductive justice work that you do. Are you okay to talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Love to talk a little bit more.
Yeah, so I work for a reproductive justice nonprofit. That's kind of I would say my that's how I learned about like the social justice world. I would say separate. I think when I became vegan, it was like food, and like that's where I was. And then it was like, like going to vegan restaurants and reading pamphlets about other things. And I'd be like, okay. And then festivals. But I think for me, understanding some of the intersections, and then like being exposed to like Carol Adams and the sexual politics of meat, and some of the other things that I started like learning about that kind of where reproductive justice and veganism overlap, or animal rights. I was like, whoa. And then there's also I'm really interested in the anti-racist work in both of those movements. And
Yes.
so yeah, that's my.
Oh, yeah, it's very important. I think I was talking to Jack earlier, off camera. I'll say this on camera. But I was talking about doing a demonstration with PETA at a circus. And they were like, hey, Donald, can you get in the cage? And I'm like, no, you don't want the black guy in the cage. That's not going to look right for what we're here for. So just really thinking about how that, trickles down like the race port and all of our compassionate dealings with people that are not like us. So when you talk a little bit about the reproductive justice, I really appreciate that and enjoy that. And I'm actually going to look more into that. But that's going to take me to my next question is, when did you first realize you wanted to be an artist? And I know that might be a difficult question, but what was the first moment you're like, okay, I was born to do this?
I think when I was born, I've always I think we all love art. And now that I have a toddler and I'm around a lot of toddlers and I see that, I think that there's a different art form for all of us, of course. Like some of us are performers and some of us are like individual, like we all have our different strengths. But I feel like I always knew that art expression was important for me, was essential for me. And I think figuring out like I could do this as a career and make money has been the part that I'm like in recent times I've figured out. I'd say like maybe since I moved to California in 2011 was the first time I was like, wow, people are like paying their bills with the things that they love. Because I think there's this really strong misconception. I feel like KQED did an article recently that was about like why people don't pay creatives. And it's because they feel like if you're doing something that you're passionate about, you don't deserve money. Your passion is but like we know passion does not pay the bills. And compensation is really important. And so I think understanding that I could be an artist and that could be something that is valuable, that I can contribute to the world and that I deserve income for that has been something that I've learned, and I'm still learning like within the past decade.
Yes. I'm just gonna drop the PSA right here. Please purchase this art. You can visit Alise Eastgate and Jack Eastgate's website to commission pieces of work. Again, I mentioned earlier, I'm an art collector, so I truly do appreciate the work that you create, and being able to see your work and then see you and learn more about it is just to me is always mind blowing. So I'm excited. Which just drags me to my next question. How do you see your art as being a tool for change in the world?
I hope that by expressing myself through art that I can help other people do the same for themselves. I hope I can ask, like my art, I think is asking questions more than anything. Not really, I don't have answers. I just have a lot of curiosities that I'm working through on canvas. And I hope more people get curious, and I hope more people get open for themselves.
Yeah, I saw Richard Blanco. He's a poet. He's the poet, inaugural poet for Obama's inauguration. And he was talking, this is after the inauguration, but he was talking and he said, art has gone where no politician has gone before. And I saw Richard like last week and I brought that up and he's like, we say these great things and never remember. So I'm excited that you brought that to my attention. I was like, yeah, I quote you every day. So today I'm using that quote just today because I have to use it every day. But how does your work, or how do you see your work commenting on current social or political issues?
I love that you said that, that you said both that quote and that reflection back, because I think yeah, I think that's true for a lot of creatives, is like, I don't know, we're just working our stuff out. I have no idea. And, you know, some people, of course, are more able to communicate that with their words. For me, it's the art. That's why I do art, because that's my form of expression. I think that I live in the current social political environment, and anything I make is therefore connected to it, you know? And I feel the same way about being vegan, about being Black, about being a woman. Like, everything I do is going to be, that's layered. That's part of my work, because that's who I am, and it's what I bring to it every day. I'm walking through the world with these experiences. I'm experiencing the world, so it's coming back, just like one person's interpretation of it. And I'd like to think that we all have like a broader connection. I think we're all connected. I truly believe that. And so I think that hopefully in me speaking like my truth, or getting closer to it, or doing my best, that it resonates with someone and their truth.
Yeah, I love that. It's, you know, we create what we are, you know, our experiences and things of that nature. Jack mentioned that you weren't you were taking a break from social media, right? And I think, you know, sometimes that's useful for a lot of creatives to just to work out their own art and work out through their own process and things of that nature. My next question is going to be about you and Jack's collaboration, but how did Eastrand Studios come into being?
Well, I think when we met, it was kind of like, we met, I'm sure Jack shared, I met his art before I met him. And then we kind of met on that level, and he was live painting. I was new to California. I was new to this idea, like, what, you get paid to do what you love? That's crazy. And I joined him for a live paint in 2012. And I was like, this is cool. And at the time, you know, we were living together, we were dating, we were getting prints from the same place. We were vending at the same markets. We're like, let's just make this a thing. Like, let's, you know, what if we had one Etsy shop and only like one, you know, like, let's cut down on some of this administration here. And Eastgate Studios was born. We were living on a street called Rand at the time. And my last name is Randolph, and his is Eastgate. And so we're like, let's just do this thing. And that's kind of, it's evolved over time, what we've been able to do, skill sets we have, what we bring to it. And so that's that.
I love that. I've cried a little bit. I'm trying not to cry, but I really love that story. My wife just walked in the door too, so I'm like, oh. But yeah, I'm gonna bring up too. If we were in person, you know, my favorite kind of segments are when they like go through people's Instagram and then like explain that photo or explain what happened. So I'm gonna bring up 2 images, and I'm actually just gonna ask you to give us a little bit of background about it, about the process, where it appears, if you remember, and things of that nature. So this is gonna be my first one that I show. Would love to know just a little bit of thoughts about this image here.
This is an image from AFCO's Racism as Zoological Witchcraft. And Jack and I did the illustrations for this book. I think I don't want to say I think it is just true. Af's brilliant. And we've been lucky enough to work with her on a few projects. Black Vegans Rock, we did the website and branding for that. We did Af and Silco's book, their first book together, Afroism, and then we did the cover and the illustrations for this book. And so it's Racism as Zoological Witchcraft, a guide to getting out. It's brilliant. I think everyone should get it. And she did, like, the illustrations came from Af has the words and the thoughts, and the illustrations were my interpretation of her work, and Jack's interpretation of her work, some of them. So this one is about the natural hair movement. And I really love how Af is great at looking at the media and also at other movements. I think she's very I don't even want to use words because she's so great at the words. So I have the images that speak to what she says.
Understood. I love the representation. You know, I think about how our hair is very powerful. And then just looking at, you know, this is beauty to me. I had a conversation with my students last week where I said, hey, just Google beauty or beautiful woman and tells me what pops up, right? And it's this idea of the Marilyn Monroe 1960-ish white woman, right? right? And you have to scroll pages on pages before blackface even pops up, right? And so really just thinking about how this piece challenges those notions and is not only just commenting, but it's redefining what beauty is for us in our society. So I truly did enjoy that image, and I love art and its connection with the world that we live in. And then this is the next image that
I'll also share on that last one really quick. A lot of those, the people I use for like reference in there are like Instagram influencers. I feel like that are really big in the natural hair world, or just different people like that. I found like I was using them as my image references because I think that they are doing, like you said, Google lets us down. So there are, I feel like there are other segments. And so I was looking for people that are really making that their platform.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm in love with your work. I don't know. I'm so excited. I'm excited to be here and get to talk with you. This next image I'm going to pull up reminds me a little, I'm not sure if you are familiar with Sophie Gammon's work. I think that's her name. I hope I didn't ruin her name. But she does like she takes the dogs, mostly pit bulls that are like in shelters, and she puts the flower crowns on them and does the photos with that work. But yeah, let me just can you tell us a little bit about this piece?
Yeah, I think maybe like inspired by her work without even knowing it, really. This I did after so Dr. Amy Breeze Harper of Sister Vegan had a conference in 2015, I want to say. And I did the artwork for the conference, and that was how I got connected with I feel like that's where I started kind of expanding that view, like your earlier question, which I thought was great, about like separating, like when did you become vegan and when did you start living a compassionate lifestyle? That kind of like was an awakening to me about a compassionate lifestyle. And on this conference, there were so many, like it was a virtual conference. I listened to the speakers and my mind was just like blown. I think I'd learned about her work through her book, Sister Vegan. And that was also really mind blowing, and kind of like we were talking about with the PETA experience. You have stories of like a Black woman who worked at PETA, and like different people who had like all of these experiences in their veganism that I was like, whoa. And on the conference, I can't remember who exactly was the speaker, but there was a talk kind of about pit bulls and kind of like where racism shows up in the animal world, and I think about it and how like when you, like as a renter for so long, like if you look at Alise, and I have a dog, and whenever I would pay attention to like, are dogs allowed? Yes, except for breed restrictions, no pit bulls, and was always on the list. I think about like in England, if you're like traveling internationally with a dog, I believe in England, it used to be, when I last looked this up, which was a few years ago, if you have a dog that's suspected to be, I think a pit bull, maybe an American bulldog, there's a couple of breeds, they can put that dog down upon arrival. It's not allowed in the country. Like there's like a absolutely no. And I just think about this concept of like, I have a small dog. She's a poodle pug mix, we think. And like, she's capable of biting. She could do damage if she wanted to, and like, it's kind of like, I know, sure, pit bulls too. Quite frankly, Frenchies too, but there's like a very different connotation of who has these dogs, right? And like who these dogs represent, who are they associated with? Like, there was a big talk about on this conference about Michael Vick, and like just kind of these, just like where racism and animals overlie. Like when we think about pit bulls, who are we thinking about? Like what kind of person are you thinking about? What's the gender and race of that person? How different it is in this conference. I think the person speaking was like maybe like a white person, and I don't know, maybe like, I don't know if it was a white woman or a queer white person or somebody, but they were just saying like, there's a lot of safety they face when they're with their dog, their pit bull, and there's like a lot of lack of assumptions. It's kind of cute and trendy to have a pit bull for certain people, and then there's this other connotation when other folks have a pit bull. And so I'm just thinking about that. I do love flower adornments. You see the piece behind me's got like a flower crown. And so yes, to the photographer you're speaking of, yes, about her work, and also just like thinking about delicate and beautiful pit bulls are, and how delicate and beautiful Black people are, and how like here we are as a culture. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. I know this is all beautiful. I'm probably gonna have to chat with my wife so we can see if we can get one of your works with the flowers. We just got a flower painting from an artist. Her name was Lois Mailou Jones. She did a lot of art in Paris during the 1930s. So she's the longest surviving member of the Harlem Renaissance. And I'm excited to have her piece, but would love to kind of group y'all pieces together, because I do think that, you know, flowers and those, and just your art and how you are describing your art is in conversation with her work as well. So really excited.
Could you please send me her name when we get off here? I'm so curious. I need to look at this up now.
We'll do. And so, yeah, I think that answers all of my questions. And so I'll end it on just a very short question. Hopefully we just have just one quick answer, but is there something you do today that you wish you would have known to do years ago?
How much time we got? I have like so much to say about that. I will say, like, as far as like thinking about compassion, veganism. Yep. I think as a new vegan and a new vegan making art, I think I had I would do things differently. I think, I don't know. I think there would be some more self-investigation. I think there was this feeling of, I got to change the world. I got to get people to go vegan. I got to convert people. I got them to see what I see. I need vegans to quit being racist. I need I need everyone else to stop eating meat. I need to change like the outside world. And I'm just learning that like, I've got a lot to work on for myself, and I've got a lot of people I love. And I hope that by, you know, especially like with my kid, I'm like, okay, I got to focus here. And I would like to tell my younger self, like, hey, just focus inward, and that's going to help your compassion go outward, and it's going to help other folks too. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alise. Please send my thanks to Jack. It's been a wonderful time interviewing the both of you all, learning about your process, learning about your work, and I wish you nothing but the best going forward. If you are watching this, please check out their websites, buy their art. I can't stress how important it is to support your artists who are doing the work that needs to be done in order to create change in our communities. I wish everyone such a beautiful conversation. And thank you so much, Alise. I'm going to end our recording with this beautiful poem by me, based on an image or art piece by Jean-Michel Basquiat. The title of the art piece is called The History of Black People. And this poem just comes to mind when I think about my conversation with Alise. This is titled The History About Black People after Jean-Michel Basquiat's painting of the same name. We be the kings and queens of ancient cities, Pythagoras of pharaohs, pyramids, or reaping sword singers following the drinking gourds. We be the soul of the blues, can't sleep at night, can't eat a bite because the nation we love, she don't treat us right. We be a most beautiful Black, salmon pink colored skies in the mind of the blind. Thank you so much for participating, joining us. Give a clap for yourself. Thank you for learning more about the 8th Trust, learning more about things you can do for the animals, whether it's being a voice or a spokesperson for the animals, spreading awareness, sharing the message. You too can use your own creative abilities in ways that promote social change and makes everyone feel inclusive. That's all for me. I'm Donald Vincent, also known as Mr. Hip. See you all on Instagram. Bye-bye.